And it's something that I really encourage with young people today, is to sort of find that sense of freedom in what you're doing. Don't be afraid to go out and, find an audience quickly, because the audience will, the feedback that they give you, the energy they give back, it spurs you on to greater things. And that's the most important factor, I think. Space, race, pull it into orbit, moonshots, give it all you got now. Space, race, pull it into orbit, moonshots, give it all you got now.
You are listening to Notables, an Education Through Music podcast. As always, I'm your host, Noah, and my guest is Keanan Duffty. Keanan is a New York-based British designer and singer-songwriter, and Education Through Music's 2025 Music Innovation Award winner. Keanan, thanks so much for joining me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be here.
The way I always start these interviews is by asking, how did you first become a musician?
Well, my mum and dad sent me for piano lessons when I was 8, and I didn't really like it. I didn't really like the piano teacher. He was kind of a bit of a grumpy old guy, and it didn't really connect with me at all. I learned sort of rudimentary, chords and melodies, but it didn't really connect with me. I was more interested in playing guitar. So subsequently, I was introduced to a guitar teacher who started teaching me classical guitar. And my mum and dad very kindly bought me a classical guitar with nylon strings. And I kind of jumped into that. But what really transformed my musical learning experience was when the guitar teacher showed me how to play a bar chord, which for any guitarist, you'll know you put your index finger across the neck and you make an E chord. And then you can play up and down the neck pretty much any rock music that you want to play, whether it's Led Zeppelin, whether it's the Sex Pistols, whatever you want to play, you can play it with the bar chord. Not so much jazz, not so much funk, but maybe, the kind of rock and roll stuff. And so that gave me a lot of freedom. So I instantly painted my beautiful classical guitar black, which of course you're going to do, and started thrashing away, playing a bar chord. So that was kind of the magic moment for me. And my guitar teacher was a nice guy. He had a band, and his band sort of emulated the Beach Boys. They had a single record out in probably 1978, which was called Skateboarding, which was the big thing at the time. And it was very much, if you imagine any Beach Boys record that mentions surfing, and you sort of change the word surfing out to skateboarding, that was kind of their modus operandi. So, I owned that record for a while as well. So I kind of had this guitar teacher who I then saw on stage playing, gigs. So it sort of made it seem like that was possible. So he taught me the bar chord, and then I could kind of see him up there doing it, So that was a sort of amazing epiphanal moment for me.
Yeah, you get the keys to the city with the bar chord. You can do anything. And then to have that model of someone who's not only, working with you on the guitar, something that, you spend a lot of time alone, sort of locked in a room in order to get to the point where you feel like you can play on stage, but you're seeing someone play on stage and getting that model.
Yeah.
How long was it from when you started playing guitar to when you started doing some performing yourself?
Oh, pretty quick. After I learned the bar chord, that was it. It was, I was kind of plugging a microphone into, my mum and dad had this, in the sort of 50s, 60s and 70s, there used to be this piece of furniture that was in most people's houses, especially in the UK, and it was called a radiogram. And it essentially was a drinks cabinet, a record player and a radio, but with a valve amp, which is key, because valve amps sound beautiful, warm, rich. So I would get my mum's 45 vinyl record collection, which was mostly Elvis with a little bit of Johnny Mathis, I did appreciate Johnny Mathis later, but not at the time. A little bit of the Beatles and a few other kind of beat groups, and I would plug in a microphone into the radiogram and tape it to my guitar and play along with these tracks, or at least thrash around, try and figure out the chords. So, I was immediately a kind of, making music in the living room. And then I sort of roped in my friends in the neighborhood and, got one guy on upturned biscuit tins with knitting needles as drumsticks, another guy on a homemade, I wouldn't call it a synthesizer, but it was an electronic kit that could make noises. And so we had a little band, and the amazing thing about music is the collaborative aspect of it, getting together with other people and making an awful noise. But to you, it's magical. And it kind of, you transcend the skill set that you have. You kind of become something else in your shared imagination. And I think that's a great way to learn together as well, because it's a very rudimentary stage. So you're all beginners, but you're kind of finding your way together. And there's something quite magical about that. So yeah, that was a really sort of transcendent moment for me.
Yeah, the strength in numbers and the greater than the sum of the parts, I think, is really important. And I mean that's what is so exciting about playing music for, especially for a lot of kids. I think there's this social aspect, and being part of a band is the same as playing a musical instrument by yourself in terms of the musical facility that you're demonstrating, but being part of that shared experience, I think.
Yeah. Well, it's also, you start to forge a gang mentality. And that's a big part of contemporary music, particularly in the kind of band format. It's sort of having that shared mission and having a kind of shared goal, that's about not just the music that you make, but it's about the clothes that you wear. It's about your haircut. It's about all of those things. And, in that gang, you spur each other on. So, from my little band with the biscuit tins and the homemade synthesizer and the acoustic guitar, we then managed to get, I got an electric guitar by swapping my banana seat 70s bicycle with a friend of mine who had a really bad electric guitar, kind of Sears catalog style electric guitar and amp. The guitar would not stay in tune. And, my friend on the synthesizer kind of moved on to another instrument. The friend on the drums actually got a drum kit, and another friend got a bass guitar. So we sort of had the beginnings of a proper band, and we could move from the living room into the garage and become a garage band, which was, again, another magical moment, and annoy the neighbors. In the house, we were just annoying my mum and dad, but once we were in the garage and the volume went up, we were then annoying the neighbors, and that's a great thing to do as well. And I remember as a kid, not only, so I loved the kind of contemporary music that was around at the time, pop and rock and so on. And but I also, growing up in the north of England, there was there were two camps. There was a group of kids in the school playground who were into what you would call rock music. And then on the other side of the playground were a group of kids that were into a musical style that was known as Northern Soul. And what that was imported records from the US that were on regional labels that were kind of R&B music. They would land in the UK, and people would go to flea markets or collectible record stores and find this music, which had a transcendent feel to it, because it was something you could really dance to. So there was also that in the playground, there was that influence of hearing the kind of, rock music that you maybe thought was sort of an intellectual approach, but then also the dance music, which had an emotional feeling to it. And so there was that sort of magic of combining those two. And then as a kid, I was really lucky, because when I was 13 years old, the punk movement exploded around the world, and especially in the UK. And what that told you was that you actually didn't need to be in tune, and you didn't need to be able to actually play. As long as you did it with passion and verve, and people would come and see you. So we were, going from the living room to the garage, and then very quickly playing in the school gymnasium, in the village hall, in the church hall, and so on. So we kind of had proper gigs, and people would come and turn up and, jump up and down to our music and, really enjoy it. So that was quite a magical time. I think that sense of freedom was really special. And it's something that I really encourage with young people today, is to sort of find that sense of freedom in what you're doing. Don't be afraid to go out and, find an audience quickly, because the audience will, the feedback that they give you, the energy they give back, it spurs you on to greater things. And that's the most important factor, I think.
We've traced your journey from piano to guitar to playing in local venues. I'm wondering, so you've built a career out of both music and fashion, and so we've heard about the music. I'm curious about the fashion. I'm wondering how these two disciplines fit together in such a way that you've been able to pursue excellence in both simultaneously, when it's sort of a normal expectation that when you want to pursue excellence in something, you have to drop everything else. So I'm wondering how the two make it so that you can do both.
So it's the 10,000 hour rule. So I had to do 10,000 hours in both subject matters. So it was a good time management exercise. Everybody that I admired as a kid, that I saw as a musician, they always had fantastic clothes. They looked great, whether it was, Tina Turner, for example, in the movie of The Who's Tommy. I saw her really performing I saw her for the first time in that movie. And then other artists from that early 70s period. In the UK, it was David Bowie, Roxy Music, pretty much any band that had the Beatles, for example. They had a boutique, they had a fashion store for a while. Their image was very, very important. And it was, again, another way of storytelling. And so that's why I think that fashion and music sit so well together, because they kind of complete the storytelling. And I realized pretty early on that I wasn't going to be a virtuoso musician. I wasn't going to be the world's best piano player or the world's best guitar player, but I could be a good storyteller. And so that's where the writing element comes into it. And one of the great things about punk was you were sort of expected to write your own music, or do really bad cover versions, intentionally bad cover versions of other people's music, and kind of make it your own. And so that's where the Venn diagrams of music and fashion really cross over for me. It's the storytelling aspect. And it's been a very natural, symbiotic relationship. I saw people wearing amazing stuff on TV, and I kind of wanted to have those clothes. I didn't realize that they were made by designers or, made by sort of fabulous boutiques in London. I just thought, oh, I'm seeing this person wearing all of this glitter on TV. How can I do that? So initially it was like getting my clothes and gluing glitter all over them, which my mum and dad, they were very supportive. They said, go for it. So, and it was very rudimentary. And then finding ways to turn my big flared trousers into skinny pants, because the kind of big thing about punk was, you had to be wearing skinny pants. You had to have short hair. It was the opposite of what was happening at the time in popular culture. And then learning from that, okay, the bar chord was the epiphanal moment for me playing music. The sewing machine was the other epiphanal moment, making fashion. It was okay. I realized that I can't cut my flares down to skinny jeans and stick them together with duct tape because they fall apart.
Right.
I need to get a sewing machine, learn how to do it properly. So, they were the two moments that really kind of gave me the signposts of the way forward.
Yeah, the sort of parallel in these two disciplines, I think, is really interesting, that you have sort of applied the same understandings and skills from one into another, and it's the same path,
Yeah.
more or less.
It's all creativity. I mean, I really believe that creative expression is a fundamental right for everybody, to express themselves, to express how they feel, to express their hopes and dreams, their beliefs and so on. And music is a wonderful way to do that, and fashion is a wonderful way to do that. They're both sort of equally central to the human experience. What you wear communicates to others the kind of gang you belong to, for better or worse. And it's not that we're in a culture today where so much is centered around luxury and celebrity and so on. But to me, that doesn't matter. It's never mattered. Actually making a statement, style is really important, and that's what musicians have always done. They've always had a style. They don't follow fashion. They kind of create a style that influences fashion. And so, my pathways have been actually in music and in style. I'm more interested in stylistic presentations. And that's why it's been great going to visit some of the high schools that are part of education through music, because I'm seeing young people presenting themselves, even in their school uniforms. They have a style, the way they wear their uniform, the way they wear their hair, the way they carry themselves when they're performing and when they're not performing. It's really key. It's sort of, emphasizes their sense of pride in themselves, their confidence, and actually playing music and having a stance really helps young people develop their confidence in the world. So I think it's not to be dismissed as kind of a shallow thing. The way you look has an importance in terms of communicating with others, and your creative expression is really key.
And now for a short break. This podcast is made possible by Education Through Music. ETM's mission is to positively impact student motivation, achievement, and self-confidence by partnering with under-resourced schools to integrate music education into the core curriculum. To find out more or to support ETM in its mission, go to etmonline.org. Over the course of your career in fashion, you've worked closely with some of the artists that you were watching on TV in your youth, like the Sex
Yeah.
Pistols and David Bowie. And I'm wondering what it's like to not only meet your heroes, so to speak, but also to like build relationships with them, professional relationships.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's something that I talked to the band at All Hallows about, because I said to them, I really believe in sort of manifesting your destiny. And I told them I have so many notebooks that go back years and years that are full of lyrics, ideas, but importantly, they're also full of lists of things that I want to do, people that I want to work with. And at the time, those lists might have meant, you know, that they probably were sort of way out of reach, for me, or seemed way out of reach. But the intention of saying, I want to collaborate with this person, I want to work with this person, it puts it out there into the universe. And some of those things have actually come to being. There are many of them actually in my case. I've been very, very blessed and fortunate to actually have the opportunity to work with some of the people that you mentioned and others. And I think it's an important thing for young people to have those goals and to not, people are people. When you meet David Bowie, he's a guy, he's a person. He's actually David Jones. They're rock icons and they seem otherworldly, but when you meet them, they're actually real people. You're just connecting with another real human being, and it could be your buddy that you want to be in a band with, or it could be a rock icon that you ultimately want to work with. So what I say to young people is go for it, always go for it. Put yourselves out there into the world, try and reach these people, try and connect with them, go to shows, try and go backstage, talk to people, connect. It's networking and connecting is really key, whether it's music or fashion or anything else, any other creative endeavor that you're involved in. It's very rare to work, as a solitary individual, unless you're a writer, for example. If you're a novelist or whatever, you maybe work in a solitary way. But as a musician or, as a fashion designer, you work collaboratively in a team. And so it's very important to make those connections. When I was a kid, in high school, I won a prize. and it was a storytelling prize. And so they asked me, okay, in front of the whole school, you're going to be awarded a book as an acknowledgement of the prize. Which book do you want? And I said, I want the songs of David Bowie. And so the English teacher was kind of annoyed because he said, well, you're supposed to pick, Shakespeare or something really, really important. And I said, yeah, Bowie is important to me. So anyway, they gave me the prize, and inside it has this, note from the headmaster. And years later, I told David about this, and he said, oh, bring the book. Next time I see you, bring the book. So I brought the book, and he wrote in it, I expect you to look after the next book a lot better than this one, Duffty. 6 out of 10. Because after all these years, this book is really beaten up, and it's got notes in it, from my learning all of these songs. So this has kind of traveled with me from 1978 till this very day. And it's really an indication to me that you can, as a young person, you can have a dream. And I know it sounds cheesy, but that dream can actually come true. If you kind of if you're lucky, if you're open, if you kind of embrace the possibility of expression and of expressing yourself and of putting yourself out there into the world, it can happen. So yeah, I think this is a really great indication to me of proof of concept.
Keanan, thanks so much for taking the time to talk to me today.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And, just my last message to all the young people that are out there being creative, just do something creative every day. Even if it's, you make a note in your notebook, you play a few bars of music, you wear your school uniform in a slightly different way. You express yourself. Just do something creative every day. It's really important. That's the way you get to the 10,000 hours.